Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for part 2 in our panel series, Leadership in Service to Community. My name is Becky Miller, and I'm the president of Leadership Fauquier. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating a thriving community through informed and connected leaders. We accomplish our mission by developing knowledge, skills, and networks in our existing and developing local leaders. Normally, we would be in the midst of our exciting 10-month program, but due to the pandemic, we have had to pivot and are focusing on educational events like these. We are planning our traditional in-person program this fall, and our application process will be opening soon. Please reach out to our Executive Director, Sandra Rosel, or any of our board members for information on the application process. Now, I would like to introduce Nathan Gilbert, our Vice President, to recognize our generous sponsors.
Thank you, Becky, and I echo Becky's thanks for watching today. And before I thank our current sponsors, I'd like to ask anyone who's out there listening to consider sponsoring our next event, which will be held on March 25th. So I'm sorry in advance if I hit you up for that. Our first sponsor is Novec and Angie Thomas, so thank you to them. Walker Jones and Mark Heisen, thank you very much. Janice Sutton Insurance Agency, most of you probably know her as Jan. And last but certainly not least, my own firm, Meridian Financial Partners. So I guess thank you to my business partner, Sarah Yackel, for sponsoring. I'll now hand it over to Caroline Wood, who will be our moderator for today. Enjoy.
Thanks, Nathan, and welcome everyone to our second panel, Leadership in Service. We're going to focus on our community and leading in service to the community today. So thank you for joining us, and thanks to our esteemed panelists who I'll introduce in a moment. My name is Caroline Wood. I am with Lord Fairfax Community College. We are your local community college. We serve 7 counties, including Fauquier County. And I am also on the board of Leadership Fauquier and a 2020 graduate of the Leadership Fauquier Leadership Development Program. But I want to first welcome our panelists today. We have from the Warrenton Police Department, our Chief of Police, Michael Kochis. We have from Experience Old Town Warrenton, the Executive Director, Charity Furness. We have from Social Services, Shel Douglas, who is the Director of Social Services for Fauquier County. And we have a Supervisor, Leigh McDaniel, who is a managing partner at Upgrove, McDaniel, McMullen, and Chiquetto, but her claim to fame is she is the chair of our Fauquier County Board of Supervisors. And I want to kick off our panel question with a quote. So kind of to center us to think about what we want to talk about today. So the late Senator Paul Wellstone from Minnesota once said, "We all do better when we all do better." So if our panelists could each take a few minutes to talk about your role in serving the community, the population that you're serving, your clients, so to speak, and then how that relates to the larger community as a whole. How do we all do better because your clients do better? We'll kick it off with Supervisor McDaniel.
Thank you very much. And I would like to start by thanking Leadership Fauquier for putting the panel together. It's been an honor to serve on it, and I'm looking forward to it. I guess I would start by saying leadership is something that I think, there's some natural leaders, but a lot of us sort of have to learn how to be a leader over time. And experience has been extremely helpful for me personally as a leader. And the honor, I guess, to serve as on the Board of Supervisors, because I think as a local elected official, this is probably one of the last areas where I think the connection between the constituent and the elected official is still very close. I mean, my constituents talk to me in the grocery store, at the gym, used to be at the gym anyway. Phone calls, emails, and they all get, I respond to all of them because the goal is to see how government can make their lives better easier and how we can do it in a way that is cost effective to the taxpayers. So I'll kind of stop here and give someone else a chance to jump in.
Shel, do you want to jump in and tell us a little bit about the clients you serve and how we can support them and how they will do better and we'll all do better if they're served?
Sure. The agency really has the opportunity to serve a broad variety of our citizens. We have the responsibility to provide the safety net for financial support for families in crisis, but we also have the responsibility to provide protective services for children and adults who may be at risk of abuse or neglect. So by being able to provide both of those safety nets, we offer the opportunity for families to flourish or have that lifeline for sustainability in our community. So when everybody has the opportunity to do a little bit better, then all of us have the opportunity to succeed a little bit better.
And how about you, Charity?
Sure. As soon as my phone started ringing, so I'm trying to silence even the vibration. I started my service here in Fauquier County at Fauquier County Fauquier Fish. And we have, our motto is to treat your neighbors like you'd want to be treated. And then we also say that doing good doesn't mean you can't do better. So I started really developing my own personal leadership skills and community service while serving on the food pantry board. And it was just a way of treating everyone that came in as a friend and how you would help them to take that to the next level and making sure that if I was in need, that I could treat them that way. And then doing good doesn't mean you can't do better. So just because your status quo, everything's fine, we're all fine. What can we do to make it better? How can we give them the next level of support that they need to be able to start helping themselves? And then when I transitioned into a role where I'm supporting the local community and the businesses with the Main Street program of Warrington, I took that same approach. And I looked at our business owners and our community and our property owners. And I said, what could I do? What do they need? And a lot of it's just support, a friend to talk to, somebody that says, hey, listen, I'm a business. I've never had to apply for a grant before. How is that different than applying for a loan? And just giving them that extra care. So really taking that and looking at the needs. If I was in their shoes and having that compassion, how would I want to be treated and what would I need in that situation? So that's what I look at is, how would I want to be treated? And then if I'm doing okay, what can I do to be better? And how can I help there as well?
Chief Kochis, how about you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Leadership Fauquier, for welcoming me. You guys have welcomed me from the beginning, and I really do appreciate it. I started here February 1st of 2020. About a month into this, pandemic hits, budget crisis hits, law enforcement gets beat up a bit, our profession. Some of it's justified. Some of it I think might, they may have gone a little too far. But I will tell you, I think doing better really means thinking differently about things. And that's not only thinking differently about how we serve the community, but also how, as a leader, do I serve the rank and file where we are? Because I think it's important to not only be engaging and involving the community and communicating with the community, but what you do exteriorly, like outside our agency, it's just as important to do that internally, especially over the last few months of scrutiny on our profession. Our officers need to know, that they are good people. They're good folks. They have this is a noble profession. They're doing a good job. It's just we can always do better, and things are changing, and we need to be able to change with that. So I think, from a leadership standpoint, to me, leadership is something that you have to continuously improve on. The old adage, leaders are readers. my folks make fun of me here all the time because I'm always like, hey, I'm reading this book on this leadership thing or that. Oh, did you get this from a book? But it's so important to continue to do those things, continue to work on our craft as leaders. And leadership is a craft. It's something that you have to continuously work on and develop. And because when you have a crisis like a pandemic, when you have a crisis like a budget crisis that we're going through, or a scrutiny placed on our law enforcement profession, it's those basic leadership principles that you will always fall back on, right? Whether it be communication, that's a basic principle. It's always going to be a challenge. So finding different ways. So that's kind of how I look at how do we do better. We have to think differently now, just about our profession, about how we serve the community, and get into more involving the community in what we do. So,
you bring up a really important point about change management. Really, when you're going through a crisis and coping with chronic and acute problems, how as a group have you led your organizations and leading your clients that you serve through both the acute issues around COVID and around any perhaps financial issues, also though leading through chronic problems such as broadband or affordable housing issues that chronically they bubble up to the top of the list in Fauquier County as issues. And I'll just throw it out to anybody who wants to give it a go.
Well, if I might jump in first, I think Mike brought up a good piece that when you hit a crisis as a leader, you need to consider both your internal customer and your external customer. And you need to look at them and consider what their human needs are out of respect for them. You have to take care of the people that work with you and the people that you work for. Because if you don't take care of your workforce, you're not going to be able to get the job done. And it really shows in that relationship that you have with the people that you work with. If you can show that you're very interested in taking care of them, they're willing to go that extra mile in the time of crisis to help take care of the citizens when they're also hitting that time of crisis.
And to Shel's point, there's an adage, again, I got this from a book, so I didn't make this quote up, but it really kind of hits home to what you're saying, Shel, that nobody cares what you know until they know that you care, right? And that's so true. That quote came from General James Mattis, right? So if you think about, something about caring, you don't think of Mad Dog James Mattis being the person to say something like that. But it really does kind of hit true to what you're saying, Shel. Like, if your folks know you sincerely care about them, the work product you're going to get is better. And number two, they'll do anything for you. And again, that's going to translate to a good workforce and a good product for our community. So, yeah, good point, Shel.
I'd like to go ahead and add to it, kind of build on what Shel was saying, because if one thing we've learned in the last 10 months is that change is going to come and you have to be able to pivot and deal with it. And when we, as an accounting firm, we had to go from being pretty much 100% in our office to 100% remote in about 24 hours. And so it was a challenge, but it worked well. We learned to work with Teams and Zoom and everything we needed to do to keep our team intact. Plus, we were always communicating with our team that our first priority was them, and that we wanted to keep the team intact, because without the team, we're nothing. And so I think that message and that constant communication was critical, because they understood that we were with them and we were going to be going through this together. Nobody was by themselves, to the point where we even had to learn how to, work. And Shel, to your point, some mental health issues. Everybody's dealing with some mental health issues at this point, and I think we all see that both in our teams and our clients and folks in general, and just being caring and open and listening to what people have to say and their concerns. That goes a long way. And I think at the county level, I was actually chair last year, and it was a very exciting year to be chair, let me tell you. But the first thing we did was communication with the team. For the budget, we wanted to communicate with the taxpayers that we weren't going to raise taxes. We were going to, keep our budget steady and make sure that take every action we could to make sure that we stabilized our finances and that so that no one in the community would suffer as a result of it. So that was our main focus at the county level, and broadband, which we did a lot of work on. So thank you.
Is it okay? You minute?
Yep.
So I think my role was a little bit different. My team is based on volunteers. I don't have a large staff to rely on. So the leadership style changed. It was leadership through crisis management. And we have a lot of committees, and there's this death by committee type of thing. And what happened is our committee members also, that there wasn't their number one priority. They have jobs and families and other priorities, and this is something that they help and volunteer with. So their focus changed, and it was a different leadership style where we wanted to communicate with all of them, but a lot of decisions had to be made very quickly. So it was the communication to inform, to get that feedback, but it was instant feedback. This is changing. Do you have an opinion? Yes or no? And does it add to the value of it? So it did. And I think with the leadership, you have to be able to take your nose to the ground, but then you have to be able to pop up and say, okay, where am I? Where are we going? Have I communicated with the right people? Am I still getting the positive feedback? Even critical feedback is good. Criticism is good, and take that and make those changes and apply them. So it was a little bit different in leadership. It was those committees just had to quickly come in and make decisions, and there wasn't a lot of time to hum and haw over the little details. We just got it done. So the urgency really kicked in, and the teamwork between the town, the county, our partners with Lord Fairfax, it was fantastic. But it was all the local nonprofits and the government coming together to ensure that our community was able to succeed during a very trying time between social justice issues and health issues. We were put through the ringer last year.
I think what I'm hearing also is the importance of the communication and the transparency of what's going on around us.
Absolutely.
I think when you hit a crisis in a community, people feel like they don't know what's going on, and then that adds to the anxiety and the panic that most folks feel. So being able to communicate where we are now, what we know now, and what we anticipate, even if we have to come back later and say the plans have changed because we have new information. Constant communication with both your workforce and your citizens has been critical throughout this crisis, and being more transparent has been one of the goals that we've tried to achieve with the county this year. It's just been so critical to keep all the anxiety levels down and keep folks in the know all throughout.
It's really interesting. I'm hearing a lot of you address the piece of emotional labor of your own workforce in learning how to care and lead them through crisis. And I'm also hearing about communication and needing to communicate with both the clients you serve and the workforce. How do you collaborate with other organizations to make sure that your message and the community's message is clear? We don't operate in a community in silos. What have you learned throughout this particular time that you can move forward with as far as collaboration?
I can hit on that a little bit. You bring up the term silos. One of the things that my boss, the town manager, has really focused on early on, even before the pandemic, was breaking down the silos that exist in government, right? Town government for us specifically. And in my opinion, she's done an excellent job in doing so. And that goes back to, again, those basic leadership traits, right? Of creating a vision, making sure everybody in the organization understands what your vision is, even if it's not a formal vision, understanding what that is. And she has made it clear early on that, we're going to break down these silos, work together. And you see that day to day, right? Every little thing that happens, like this snow emergency coming up on Sunday, the emails getting sent out and the things working, whether it be public works or emergency management, and then the police department role, you could tell it's clicking in every department head's mind. Hey, boss wants us to be working together. And so we just do that, right? So that's important, because the police department can't do everything. I don't know anything about fixing roads and stuff like that. And so yeah, I think breaking down those silos is key. We've been working on that for a while. And I think the last year, even though it's been challenging, there's a lot of opportunities moving forward that have come out of that, the challenges we face.
I think I'll just go on to another example with working with the businesses is, when we did in the town of Warrington, they did the rollout Warrington, and government was able to roll back some of the regulations that prevented outdoor seating. And there's a lot of reasons that those existed, but things changed. And when businesses were told that they couldn't host people inside, but they could host people outside, and we said, well, we don't have anything outside, so let's create outdoor space. So with Experience Old Town Warrington, we were able to come in and act as that communication between the businesses and the police department and public works and the government, so the elected officials. And so creating outdoor dining is a lot of work behind the scenes, and our businesses benefited from it. They were successfully able to get through the summer where a lot of restaurants were forced to close. But not only does it affect and impact the restaurants, think about all of us, how many of us dined outside on Main Street, physically on the street this summer. And that helped with the wellness of our mental state too, is just to be able to gather, to dine, to get out of the four walls of your house. So those impacts are layers and layers, but it was working with the police department. We lowered the speed limit on Main Street to make it safer. People naturally slowed down, and that was community development said, if you narrow the street, people will naturally slow down, and that happened. So we've been looking at ways to slow down traffic on Main Street for years. Who knew if we just threw a bunch of people out there having fun, that people would slow down. So it is that collaboration and that work. It's removing those silos, and that floodgate came, and I think it knocked a lot of those silos down, and I feel like we're rebuilding in a weird sense, but we're rebuilding. So having those leaders like the town manager and all of us, that we realize that these silos aren't working in the past, and we're taking that opportunity to rebuild with these partnerships. I've certainly developed partnerships that have been fantastic through the pandemic.
I'll just use the broadband as an example of how the county has worked with different entities. When we realized that everyone was working from home, and you have to understand that probably maybe 65% of the people in Fauquier County had internet access at the beginning of last year. Something we've been working on for 15 years or so, but it was very slow, very expensive, and very laborious process. And then we realized that we didn't have the luxury anymore of not having broadband. So Sheriff's Department got involved. We got the town got involved. The fire departments got involved. School got involved. The county. I mean, everyone was working together, and we tried a lot of different things. Some of which worked very well, some didn't. But everybody was in the mindset of we have to get this done. We have to move, and we have to move quickly, and we have to do whatever it takes to make this happen. So as a result, we were probably able to increase the coverage. Even by doing some kind of innovative things like temporary cell towers and to put equipment on. Equipment was put on top of the water tower in the town. We put water, at some of the fire stations. We put up hotspots in parking lots and different county locations. And so it was a all hands on deck, and it was really great to see everybody came together to do what we could to make this happen. So I appreciate everybody's help with that.
So I love these answers because it actually reflects on something that came up in our last panel. If any of you joined us, the mayor of Warrenton talked about the slow glacial pace of government and how change is slow. And so we have three panelists who work in government, right? So we have Supervisor McDaniel, Chief Kochis, and Shel. And the thing that he said, which I'm also hearing from you, is that when there's an emergency, all of a sudden we can move quickly. So if this group were to think about some of our other chronic issues and how we can deal and cope with them, maybe in the same way as we have with issues that arose in the pandemic, do you have any ideas about how you might want to move forward, for example, with affordable housing? Silence.
Just take a big one first.
I think affordable housing. I think that's going to be Mary Lee's thing there. Huh?
Thanks.
Just take the mountain.
I'll say that affordable housing is it's systemic. It's deep-rooted problems. It's and again, it kind of goes back to being a lot of things that we've put in place in the county over the last 60 years to preserve and keep the values and the things that we all love about Fauquier County. Make it, I mean, you can almost see the county lines in Loudoun and Prince William as because of all the development that's happening to the east of us. And that we, in many ways, have slowed down to at least a manageable level is what I'd like to call it in the county. But that creates a scarcity of land, and real estate becomes a little bit more expensive, and so that's a challenge. And I think it's going to have to be a public-private partnership to make this happen, because while county, we can do zoning and we can, make changes to try to make things easier, there has to be, at the end of the day, there has to be some profit motive for the developer to do it. And in this country, affordable housing is low or no profit, and it's really hard to find, private companies that want to engage in that. But I think an excellent example of some things that have worked would be the Windy Hill. They've done a great job over several communities. They just finished about 30 townhomes in Marshall a couple of years ago, and they were, sold out before they finished the building. And they're beautiful, and but they're designed for workforce housing. I think we're also taking some steps out in Van Hill. If the barracks can be converted to apartments in a manner that will encourage them, and they would be low workforce housing, that's a very great adaptive reuse of that. And I think that there's a lot of potential. So slow progress, but progress. So I'll leave it at that.
But I think
go ahead, Shel.
But I think what we take away, before the pandemic, there were a lot of strategies that we weren't using. And it was kind of like, oh, we don't do that. We don't do that. But when the pandemic hit, we put, as Mary Leigh said, we went remote in 24 hours, and we used technology over the last 10 months like we have never used before. And folks are much more open to thinking outside of the box. And how do we achieve that? We can't do it the way we always did it. So I think, and I'm very hopeful that when we get on the other side of this someday, that we will continue to take some of those strategies that we've mastered over the last 10 months and keep those in play. So when we start looking at those systemic issues, it won't just be tackling them with the tools that we had pre-pandemic. We now have a lot more tools in our toolbox to tackle those challenges. And so I think folks are much more open to using some of those different toolbox. I always use the term that a hammer doesn't solve everything. Sometimes you need a screwdriver and a wrench. And so now our toolbox is much more expansive. And I think folks are going to be much more open to some of those different suggestions than they might have been before the pandemic on how we handle things.
And,
How
and
much,
I would
Chief
just,
Kochis?
yeah, so I would just add, when we first started when the pandemic hit, we had to develop our coop and get everything, together and figure out what is our ultimate goal. Our ultimate responsibility is to make sure when someone calls 911, they get a police officer, right? And how do we keep our folks safe in a home? So, if you'd have told me 25 years ago when I got into law enforcement that I'd be paying police officers to stay at home and teleworking, I'd have told you were nuts, to be honest with you. But we didn't have a choice, because at the end of the day, I had to make sure that I had healthy folks that can respond and answer calls and serve the citizens of the town of Warrenton. And we did that. And I have to tell you, I couldn't be more proud of my staff. We have not had one positive case. I'm knocking on wood again. But for the police department, we've taken precautions. We telework when we can. It's a little more complicated right now because our calls for service are up or significantly compared to when they were back in March. But yeah, it really made you think differently. The other thing I think that came up, and I think Mary Leigh hit on this earlier, was what we found is some of my staff couldn't telework because where they live in the county didn't have broadband or they didn't have internet access. So I didn't realize that as someone who I live in Prince William County, worked in Alexandria, I thought, my ignorant Nova of myself thought everybody had internet and whatnot. But I know the county has been working on that and trying to expand that. So yeah, I think there were a lot of opportunities with this. I think they're here to stay. I think Zoom's here to stay. I think teleworking is probably here to stay for a lot of folks. And I think that we've seen it can be productive.
I do have to ask you, Chief Kochis, how in the world do police work remotely?
Well, so what we did early on, our patrol staff, we went to minimum staffing with our folks that are on the street. So in other words, we have 4 on a shift. Minimum staffing is 2. Okay, so half of each shift would stay home for 14 days at a time, and vice versa. Now they would do sometimes they would do a telereport on their computer at home if somebody could call in, but their job was to stay healthy, because at the end of the day, I could not afford to lose an entire shift. If you think about it, if one person was contaminated or test positive for COVID, I lose an entire shift. And for a small department, I can't afford to do that. So our detectives, for instance, they telework, and they would, a lot of their job is making calls, researching things online, doing cell phone, court orders, search warrants, stuff of that nature. So again, it's outside the box thinking, and we're at a point now we are not teleworking. We don't have anyone teleworking at this point. But at the start of it, we did for a little while.
Thanks. So this will be my last COVID question, and we'll move on to service for the group. Silver linings. What as you serve the community, what have been the silver linings of this pandemic?
I will just say it forces you to think differently, right? And I think teleworking for a lot of industries are probably here to stay. And I think when you're challenged and face adversity, I guess, if you will, as a community in general, I think you see people step up. You see the best of people. Now, don't get me wrong. You could also see the worst of people. But I think in large, we've, at least here for the town of Warrenton, we've seen what our community can do. Everything from what Charity talks about what's happened on Main Street. I think that's going to be the new normal, outdoor seating, which is great. And so it just forces you to think differently, I think, is a silver lining, how I look at it.
I'll just address how it's things that we've done at our firm. And that was, I would say that tax season is kind of a well-oiled machine around here. I mean, we all know what we're doing and we're all working at highest efficiency. And you're having a pandemic, and then every deadline that we had changed, and they changed daily, and the rules changed daily. And one of the biggest tax acts in the history passed in 1 week. And it was the largest, and all of a sudden we had to advise clients on what's a PPP loan, what does that mean, how do I get it, how can I make sure I get forgiven, it was just everything you can imagine. And then we were also doing taxes. So again, the team rose to the challenge. They did a fantastic job. But again, I think during this tax season, which I hope will be a little calmer, we have instituted work from home where people can work a couple of days a week from home. We have collaboration days where we like everybody to be in the office so that we can, because that was one thing we felt that we were losing a little bit was that collaboration. So everyone's been happy about that. And they're thrilled that they don't have to they don't have to come to the office a day or two a week because that allows them to have, during a very busy season, a stressful season, allows them to sit home in their pajamas and not have to spend the time, traveling to and from work. And they're very productive and appreciative. So that's been a learning experience for us.
I think those partnerships that have been formed, there was forced partnerships that were out of necessity. They were always they were on the to-do list. Oh, let's meet with the Small Business Development Center at Lord Fairfax. Let's meet with the police department. Let's meet with Public Works. And this time we didn't have the option to push it off until tomorrow. It became very urgent and those partnerships were formed. And, I think I've met with everybody on this panel during the pandemic just to see how we can form those partnerships and develop those relationships. So I think that's anytime you go through a crisis, those relationships are bonded very quickly and deeply. And I think that's where we're at now is one of the silver linings.
And I think for us, one of the silver linings was it gave us an opportunity to really look at our processes to see if there was more effective ways to do things and in ways that would benefit both the workers and our customers. And, initially we thought shutting down the lobby would be a hardship for everybody. But as we looked back on it and where we are now, we're finding that we are able to provide information to our customers in a way 24/7 that we weren't able to before. And a customer before in our old process might have to take off from their hourly paid job to come in and do an interview. But because we've revamped our process, we can do those meetings virtually. They don't have to take off time. So it's better for our clients. So looking at those process changes that we made, we are going to sustain those going forward. So that was really a silver lining for us. And we probably wouldn't have done that unless, like Charity said, we were kind of pushed to do it now. And so that's been the good thing.
I love it. It goes back to what Charity said earlier with doing good doesn't mean you can't do better. So everyone's doing better, even though none of us wanted this. I do want to let our folks know that below there's a Q&A. So if you have questions, you can drop questions in there and we'll address them as they come. Also at the end, we will have about 15 minutes for question and answer. I want to get a little personal with our panelists now. I know that when you have previously spoken about what brought you to service, many of you have talked about role models, parents, people who have modeled behaviors of service and how that influenced you. I'm hoping you can tell us a personal story about how you were drawn to service and the role that you think being an example and modeling plays in that. And we'll start with you. Let's start with you, Shel.
Well, I think there was a teacher in high school who was very dear, but that really sort of talked a lot about the service, demonstrated service in the teaching that he did. Engaged the students, listened to us, and that really challenged me and sparked an interest in me. And I always remember being in that role myself of listening to my friends and being that problem solver. So that sort of led me down the career path of being a social worker. And it's just listening and listening to people talk about what's going on in their lives and supporting them has just been a natural progression of where I am today. And I find the greatest joy in giving to others and providing services. In my adult life, I joined Rotary so that I could provide service in the community, and globally, I get an opportunity to travel and do some service work, building wells and schools in other countries. So it's not about me. It's about what the skills that I have to offer to other people to make this world a little bit of a better place.
Who would like to go next? Chief Kochis?
Sure. So I think like many cops, this was kind of a family thing for me at first. My father, going back to, so I was in the military, but I think that was also a family thing. So my father, he was in the Army, served in Vietnam, got out and became a police officer, retired as a police officer. I went in the Army. I'm a police officer. My younger brother, he went in the Army, and he's a New Jersey state trooper. So not that it was expected, because my father didn't want either one of us to go in the Army, and we did, and he didn't want either one of us to be a cop, and we did. So, I guess we're kind of a rebellious bunch in my family. But, I started when I got out of the military, I become a cop because that was kind of the thing that was expected. But when I really started to think about, do I want to be a chief of police one day, it all really came down to leadership. And I guess I had some really good mentors that I still talk to today, former chief of police down there in Roanoke, Virginia, where I started my career. And I guess, when I talked to him before taking this job, about, hey, what's some advice, and he said the two most difficult parts of any chief's job is going to be, number one, politics, number two, personnel matters. And he was right on both of them. He told me that, if one, be a professional, right? Two, do things right, because you're always going to there's always influences one way or the other to try to do things one way or another way, because they have their own reasons. But if you know the right way, always, and stick to that, know your compass, right? So, and that's worked for me. It's helped me, because there are times where you're like, what, am I doing this right? Should I do this? Man, are we, and because you hear the noise, right? But you try not to listen to it. And I find by going back to those basic principles of leadership, going back to basic principles of governing, right? Because we are part of, our government. And I think that's suited me well, and it helps me. And then understanding, I guess, understanding cops. Cops they're just great people. They really are. You wonder, and I often wonder, why is this guy a police officer? I mean, we have some highly educated officers here in the town of Warrenton at this police department. And I often ask myself, I was like, man, they could go somewhere and make so much more money, but they just love serving this community. So, law enforcement in general, we serve a community. I take a lot of pride in that. I guess it's something in our DNA or something. I don't know. You often hear that law enforcement's in folks' DNA, because it is a calling. It's not something you just say, I'm going to go do because it's a cool job. I mean, some people may start doing that, but they're not going to last long, because they're going to realize, well, it ain't all that cool. So you really have to buy into serving the community and understand that that's why we're here. So I think that's what it is for me. It really is about serving the community.
How about you, Supervisor McDaniel?
My dad was probably the most influential in my decisions, a lot of decisions I made as an adult. He was very civic minded. He served on the town council and mayor in the town I grew up in. And he also ran for the House delegates in the late 50s on a platform of integrating schools, which at the time was probably as divisive as, we think we're divisive today. But boy, it was very challenging at the time. But as a result of that, once the schools were integrated, my brother had a party one time and invited one of his friends, Earl, over to the party, and he was Black. And my dad just opened the door, and at the time, you have to remember this was the early 60s in Virginia, and it was a very different everything was very different at the time. So my dad said, I'm sorry, socially you didn't mingle. And so he said, I'm sorry you can't come in. And my brother just, you're nothing but a hypocrite to my dad. And my dad thought about it. He said, you're right. So he went the next day to Mr. and Mrs. Brooks and apologized, said, I just had a gut reaction. I did not even know that was going to happen, and I am so sorry. What can I do? So Mr. Brooks said, I would like you to help us integrate all the restaurants on Main Street. And Dad said, done. So they worked there the next 3 years and did just that. So I thought a good thing came from a bad situation. And so that was very much a learning experience for me.
How about you, Charity?
I grew up with working parents, and during the summer we went and stayed with our grandparents, and my grandparents are farmers out in Illinois. And I think from a very young age, I watched my grandma be the best hostess I've ever seen. And she would host cards, because that's a very traditional thing to do in the Midwest, but she would have her ladies over for cards. And I would watch her prepare this breakfast. She would prepare a sweet tea. She would prepare an unsweet tea. She'd prepare a decaf tea. She'd prepare lemonade and water. And then she'd have 3 ladies over. And she's got like 10 gallons of tea in all different versions. And I would always ask her, I'm like, Grandma, why are you making so much tea? And she said, well, because Patty can't have sugar. And sometimes, Mary Lou only likes lemonade, but sometimes she drinks tea also. And it was just, she wanted to make sure that when her friends came over, they had the beverage of her choice. So I watched her go above and beyond just for her friends. And it was cards. And it was nothing more than cards and friendship and fellowship. But I learned from that, that putting the needs of the others is important, and it's fulfilling, because whenever Patty would come over, she'd be like, oh, Pansy, that's my grandma's name. Oh, Pansy, you remembered I can't drink sweet tea anymore. And they would give each other the biggest hug and laugh about it and move on. And I saw the extra work that was required to prepare all those different beverages, and then the extra cleaning of all of these extra containers. But my grandma did it every time, and every time she absolutely loved it. And the women came over and felt so welcomed, because she had remembered that they couldn't have sugar, or that they liked natural sugar over sweet and low, or whatever it was. So that was when I was, a young kid, 5, 6, 7 years old. So then as I grew and I had the opportunity to give back, I talked to Sandra about when I was in high school, I had the opportunity to shop with a cop. And I was a hostess. So I was a high school kid that came and helped. And that was probably the first time I was able to give back. Even though I wasn't really financially giving back, I was able to take these kids shopping. And I felt so good to be able to see these kids buy their dad a pair of work boots, or buy socks, or whatever it was. And it was just a feeling that was, it was addicting, and it was contagious. And I felt so good giving back. And I think I've fed on that. I mean, it is very personal for me. It's I feed on giving back, and just being able to make those little details of saying you've got sweet and unsweet and decaf tea available when really you could just offer water. But going above and beyond to make sure that everybody's needs are met. And it's very rewarding, and that's kind of what's motivated me as we continue.
I want to return a little bit to, this is particularly pertinent to Supervisor McDaniel and Chief Kochis. So you're called to serve, you step up and serve, and you get sucked into politics and controversy. And certainly discourse right now has not been particularly civil. Can we talk a little bit about your roles and managing the jungle that is discourse in the community?
Well, I'll start, I guess. the first thing I learned was listen. You have to listen. If you listen to what people say, if you give everyone a chance to speak, you're not going to necessarily agree with them. And by speaking out, they're not necessarily going to get what they want. But I think that the takeaway is as long as they're being heard, I think I'll quote Holder Trumbo because he's kind of famous for this one right before budget season every year, all during budget season. He always at every meeting says, and I'm going to say this again, we have to hear from you because if we don't hear from you, we don't know what what you want us to do. So if we don't hear from you, if you want input, you've got to let us know what you want to do with this budget. And it's the same, not just of the budget, but of everything. I mean, so I do think, and again, that kind of goes back to the difference in local politics. I think that connection, it's really hard to get at the state level and almost impossible to get at the federal level. And I think that's I think that's very satisfying to me personally, that I'm happy to serve on a local level. I couldn't imagine doing it at a higher level. So that's what I have to say.
All right, I'm going to try not to get myself in trouble on this one. So if there's one entity in government that I think our residents expect to be independent and apolitical, I think that's their police officers. And I truly believe in that. I pride myself on trying to stay very apolitical. I do believe in good governing. I think it's important, especially at the local level. I think all too often you see folks, making decisions based on where they are in the political realm as opposed to what's best for themselves or that community, right? Again, I really try very hard to stay away from the politics and the political speech and all that jazz. I don't think it's good for law enforcement. I will tell you what does bother me is when folks think that maybe that support for police is resigned to one party or another. Okay. That's just not true. I think it shouldn't matter what party you belong to or where you are, by and large, most of the public supports the police. So, as much as it bothers me, and those who know me really well personally will hopefully they would never tell you, but I know that it really bothers me when law enforcement gets dragged into the political realm for one reason or another. I will tell you, I guess maybe because where I come from, when it comes to policing, I don't think good policing should be a right or left issue, right? I mean, talk about 21st century policing. The 21st century policing report was done under the Obama administration, but you know what? That's our blueprint here at the Warrenton Police Department. And it doesn't matter who did it. It's just good policing. It's good, sound policy, and that's what we do. So, I think as a profession, people try to drag us into it one way or the other, but I think our community deserves and expects their police department to stay very apolitical and to stay out of that fray.
So organizationally, just kind of to the whole group, how do you create that framework as leaders for respectful dialogue?
I think it goes back to what Mary Leigh talked about, is giving folks an opportunity to be heard in a respectful manner. That we may not always be able to agree with their position, but we hear it and we consider it. We may be limited by our resources, we may be limited by how we can move forward, but at least they've been heard and we are respectfully considering what their input into the process. And we, even at social services, whether we're doing a removal of a child or we're assisting an adult into a more restrictive living situation out of their individual home, not everybody will agree with the plan of action, but we're hearing from everybody what's your input into this, and then working with families to make the best decisions. So that respectful input is critical. whether it's law enforcement, whether it's board of supervisors, whether it's charity, I think listening to businesses, where we go from here, I think that's critical, the foundation of everything, that people have a voice and that they're heard in a respectful manner.
I agree, Shel. I think it's listening, and you mentioned also taking action. And I think that is important step, is taking action. And that action may not be the action that they want, but if you explain to them and you communicate the reasonings behind that action as well, having that communication really helps. So you're listening, you're taking action, and you're communicating why that action is being taken.
One of the things I'd like to talk about is we have folks who might be listening who are so busy and might not have time to sit on boards or might not have time to do those other things. Whereas this group has dedicated its life to service, our lives to service. How can people develop kind of habits of service? Things that they can do, such as vote or shop local. In fact, I wore this necklace today for you, Charity, because I bought it at Town Duck. So so by buying myself a necklace, I felt like I was having a habit of service. So if we could talk a little bit, how can we serve your group's needs through small habits of service?
I'll start, since you led into the shop small, and I'll go on that. Shopping small is so important because our businesses are giving back. They are the ones that are supporting the baseball teams and the basketball teams and the soccer teams. And they're donating to the PTOs. So they give back to their community. So by shopping small and supporting local, it allows them to do that. Our community came back in a big way. And a lot of it was because they weren't, we're kind of a bedroom community. So we work in Northern Virginia, but since we're working at home now, we're shopping at home and we're eating at home, and our lunch dates are local. And local is in this situation is just as important as shopping small. If you were to shop at Walmart, which nobody thinks of Walmart as shopping small, those two things don't go together. But if you were to shop at Walmart in Warrington versus the Walmart in Culpeper or the Walmart in Haymarket, your tax dollars stay in Warrington or in Fauquier County. And you're paying the same taxes. You're going to pay taxes in Culpeper, you're going to pay taxes in Haymarket, but if you're paying your taxes in your own local community, you're actually paying your local taxes, which is something that we don't think about. We don't think about where I'm paying taxes. You're paying taxes on everything. But if you're paying taxes to your local community, that does help your local roads, your local parks and rec, your local schools. So keeping those dollars local is very important. And it does support. But the other thing that you can do if you don't have time, one, shop local, that helps. Even if you're doing a purchase where you're picking up, if you're going to order online and pick up, when you pick up, those taxes stay local instead of going to the headquarters of that corporation. So if you can do that pickup, that's fantastic. Speaking of shopping local and shipping, I was at the UPS store and she said it was just amazing how people working at home has driven her business up. They've shipped over 50,000 packages just this year. Which is incredible. She goes, but people aren't taking their packages to work and then mailing them there. They're actually mailing from local homes. So those are local people that we keep employed. So that helps. That helps every bit of it. But it's just having that compassion for your neighbor. Everybody is doing virtual school right now, whether it's 3 days or 5 days. And if you see a neighbor struggling, help them out, have the kids over for an outdoor play date, just to give a little bit of mental reprieve for that parent. If you've got an aging neighbor that's having problems with their yard work, these are things that take very little effort and very little time. They take a lot of effort because you've got to start. And then once you start, it becomes very easy and very natural. But it's little things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be to a nonprofit or government agency. It can be as friendly as a local book swap or toy exchange. Little things do add up. And I think that's what you started this conversation with is doing good and doing better is by each of us being a little bit better and doing a little bit of good.
If I could chime in, I think everybody doesn't always have time trying to balance work and family and all the other obligations. So the complaint is, I don't have time to volunteer, but they're buying an extra can of green beans or an extra turkey at Thanksgiving and donating that to the food bank is a great way of giving back. We did a baby drive for our food bank, and just to get them baby supplies of diapers and things like that. And the response from the community was astronomical to get those supplies that our food bank needed. So that's a way of giving back to the community. And you're already shopping for your own groceries, adding a few extra things and then dropping those off doesn't take all that extra time. Another way of really giving back to the community is sharing information. You might read something in the paper about a clinic coming up or a service being offered, and that word of mouth, putting it out there, sharing something on Facebook about an opportunity for citizens. That is an incredible way to support the community, because you don't know that your one share could reach that person who critically needed that bit of information and they didn't see it. So that takes no time to hit that share button or to say, hey, Susie, did you know that they're doing so-and-so over at the wherever? The word of mouth is incredible in a community, getting the word out and sharing those resources. And that's a great help. And then as Charity said, checking on your neighbor. During this time, we have so much isolation going on, and we're worried a lot about folks who are getting more depressed and feeling lonely and things like that. So just calling your neighbor or popping over with some brownies or something like that, just to say, how are you doing? What's going on? Do you need anything? I'm running to the store, or I'm going, to town today. Is there something I can get for you? Just making that human contact, like Mary Leigh talked about earlier, to that connection. That's giving back. That's serving your community in ways that are sort of not what people think about donating their time, but it's a critical piece right now, and it's easy to do.
I would say that just for the CPA profession, it's very community oriented. For example, we have a CPA Day of Service every year where we pick a local nonprofit, and I just go, what do you need us to do today? And, how can we help? We've worked on blood drives before and helped out the Fauquier Free Clinic. And we also encourage all of our team members to volunteer for boards and in a community where their professional expertise could be helpful. But a lot of times, I think for many people, it kind of starts with when their kids are in school, they volunteer for the PTO, or if their kids are involved in sports, they're on the booster club. And so they sort of get that taste of service and how rewarding it is. Because Charity, you brought that up. It makes you feel good. So I'll give a little shout out to the PATH Foundation. They have a volunteer coordination group where they have many organizations who need people. And so the organizations post what they need. And so the PATH Foundation works on matching volunteers in the community with the organizations that need those particular skills. And I think it's been a very meaningful for that to happen.
So I'll kind of hit on what everybody else has already hit on a little bit, is just getting involved. Here at the police department, what I realized early on is very similar to Alexandria in a smaller sense, but it's a very engaged community, right? Folks want to be involved. They want to help out. They're like, hey, how can we help? We've done a lot here at the police department over the last year or 11 months or so. We recently brought on a volunteer coordinator who's a volunteer. She's here several days a week, and the amount of work she does just boggles my mind. I'm constantly in awe of volunteers. Even in Alexandria, we had a volunteer coordinator, and it's just the amount of work they put in. And they're not getting paid, and their payment, I guess, is their service to the community. And so, it's what are her main goals is to develop a community academy, like a citizens police academy. We're calling it a community academy because it's also going to allow business owners in town to attend it as well, because they're a vital part of our community. And I think it's going to be like 11 or 12 weeks long, and they show up once a week for a few hours. And from that pool of folks who graduate from the community academy, we then will develop a volunteer program where folks, so they know about the police department because they've been through the community academy. And then we can tap into that resource to help us out. Because look, we're a small police department. I'm sure Mary can attest to budgets there. I can say I need 10, 15 new officers. That's easy to say, but to actually make that happen is always going to be complicated and difficult. And tapping into that resource here in the Warrenton community is helpful. So just getting involved. If people, when we put out the application process for the community academy, apply and get involved. It's going to be a great program. So I'm excited about it.
And I just want to do a shout out for Leadership Fauquier. It goes back to something that Shel said is one of the powerful things about Leadership Fauquier is the power of its network and sharing and being able to collaborate and make things happen because you have a whole host of people with expertise in different areas. So I know that we work very hard at Leadership Fauquier to make sure that we get out the word and can find people who are good at things. So I just want to remind folks who are watching that there's a Q&A button at the bottom. If you have a question and you would like to drop that in there, we're happy to answer those questions for you. And so we'll be doing that. So drop it in there and we'll ask our panelists the question. So I am going to ask a question that you might hear often as a group, particularly in government. This county, Fauquier County, is so wealthy in terms of the people that live in the county. How can we not solve some of these just big problems like workforce housing or transportation? So what do they have to do with each other? And are there things that we can do to capitalize on that wealth?
I guess I'll start because this is something we face a lot in our funding from the state because it's based on per capita income, and the problem is, well, one of the issues is that while there is wealth in the community, it's pretty highly concentrated and sometimes in a not very large number of individuals. So it tends to skew our and we sort of pay for that because that means we get less money from the state for education, which is really unfortunate because some of the unique issues that Fauquier faces, we're very large geographically. We're one of the largest counties in land mass, but we're also very sparsely populated. So everything we do costs a little bit more because of that. If you have school buses, you need a lot more school buses to go a lot longer spaces to pick up less kids, for example. That's just, and same thing with affordable housing. We're in a very period of our history where low taxes are the norm. And the issue with low taxes are they're low, which is great. The other side of that, though, is that doesn't always allow us to do some of the things that we'd all like to do. At least from the government standpoint. So that's why we rely a lot on volunteers, on private industry to sort of partner with us and help us accomplish some of the things that we're not able to do alone. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'll kind of start with that if anybody wants to build on it.
I'm going to say something a little bit different, Mary Leigh, because I'm not an elected official and I don't work for government. So I can say it, money can't solve everything. And it's mindset. So we do have a lot of money and we have a lot of resources, but we have to want to change it. And affordable housing is something that we all talk about, but affordable housing is actually diversity of housing. And right now, at least the town of Warrenton's at like 94% single family home. And then in a few years, 80% of us aren't going to have kids. So who's going to want a 5-bedroom house with 4 bathrooms to clean. We're going to want smaller housing. So what happens? What's that availability? At Caroline, as you can probably attest, where do our college kids go? Do they go to my basement when they're at that age, or do they rent a house, a single family house? I try and teach my son a lot of things, but at 18, 19 years old, he's not responsible enough to care for a single family home. So there's that diversity in housing. So we have to want to make a change. And I think that's what the pandemic did for a lot of us. We talked about silver linings as, shopping local is very important. And it wasn't important until we realized we don't want these businesses to go away. So I had to be intentional about shopping locally. So we need to want that change. And then I think it would all fall in. But how do we get there? What happens to make us want that change? And it has to be something that impacts us personally to want that change and demand that change, and to go to Mary Leigh and say, listen, if you have to raise my taxes, I want that so bad that you can raise my taxes. And then we're like, well, affordable housing is important, but I like my house and I don't want to pay my taxes. So it is a mindset. Money can't solve everything. And once we as a community come together and gather and say, this is important, we can make a change, and it'll change just like that. But it's mind over matter, and money can't solve everything. But I think you're right. We are a very wealthy community. We have wonderful resources. It's just a matter of demanding those changes, and then it would happen.
We had a comment from one of our listeners that said that really that we're wealthy with leadership and people more so than even money. And I think it brings up a great opportunity for this group to share some ideas about leading to influence. We probably have a number of nonprofit leaders from the community on this, listening to this group. What would your advice be to nonprofit leaders or just leaders in the community on leading to influence?
It's an interesting one. I think you're, leading to, you got to lead by example, right? I mean, that's a kind of a cliche, right? You hear that all the time, but it really is true. If you want to make change and you want to be taken seriously and you want to project yourself as a leader, you got to act like it. And it's not only in public, right? You got to act like a leader when nobody's watching, and you got to continue to work on that craft so you can be taken seriously. So I don't know a lot about nonprofits. It's not really my world, but from a basic leadership standpoint, I'd say those basic leadership traits that we've been talking about would apply to that scenario just as much as it would apply to any other type of scenario.
And I think the chief is right. Leading to influence kind of threw me for a second, because I don't think of that. I don't think of leading to influence. I think of leading to make a change and make impacts, building that relationship with people. And most people don't wake up and say, I want to be a leader today. Because if they are thinking that, they're probably not a true leader. That's kind of where you get into that dictatorship. So I think that leadership is showing that you are leading at all times, even in tough decisions. You might make a wrong decision, but admitting to making that wrong decision and why you made that decision, and being open to learning and getting the influence. I think as a leader, we are influenced, and then we may inspire others. But I don't think of leading to influence, but making an impact and making social changes. I think there's a little bit of a difference there. So just leading by example. And if your mission is something that you need to speak out, it's getting in front of people, getting people that share that mission with you, and going from there and expanding on that. That question kind of threw me. I'm sorry. It was.
I have something to add though, and I don't even know if this is really on point, but I think a lot of people confuse leadership and management, right? They are really two different things if you think about it. managing, and I talk to my supervisors about this, my commanders, you're managing things, right? Papers, you can, writing reports, writing operation orders, stuff like that. Those are things that you're managing, and you could be really good at that or really bad at that, right? And while managing things are important, if you mess that up or screw that up, it's not that hard to fix, right? You can go back and redo the op order, redo a certain way. When you talk about leadership is you're in a people business, right? So if you mess that up, that's messy, right? Because people have emotions, and you're really diving into the inner workings of people. So you have to understand people. When I was in the FBI Academy, part of the curriculum was a class called the Psychology of Leadership. Probably the best class that I took. And it gets into that, like understanding people and how they operate and what makes them tick and that. But again, I think it's important to understand the difference between the two, right? They're not the same thing. Managing things is, if you screw that up, you can fix it. And it's not as bad. But when you screw up your leadership portion of it, and I don't think we work hard enough on the leadership angle. We always work on the managing angle, putting projects together, doing that. We're always working on that stuff. I don't think we work enough on the leadership portion of it, because that's the important part. If you're effective in the leadership portion of it, you can get things, you can really make change. So that may have been a little off topic, but I think it's important to kind of spell that out.
I think I'd like to build on that a little bit, and I'll just use board governance as an example. We've all probably been, if you've been in a nonprofit world, you've been on a board, and I've seen some boards that are highly effective, and I see some boards that are highly dysfunctional. So when you try to look at what the difference is, why is it, what's happening here? And generally, it's dysfunctional ones are where no one's talking, no one's listening. And one or two people are trying to run the whole show sometimes, and it's painful for everyone involved, and it's also kind of cascades down to the organization overall and leads to poor results, if you will. But if you have a highly functioning board that's working together, they're influencing each other in a positive way. Everyone kind of listens and works together to for the good of the organization. You can accomplish some really powerful things doing that. So I think that's one of my biggest takeaways for influence is how to influence you and your team for the better and for the good of the organization. So that's my take on it.
And I think for me, I'll agree with Charity. Your question kind of threw me for a minute, but I think when it comes to leading to influence, advocacy is the greatest characteristic that I think we all need to bring to the table, and clear advocacy to know what we're advocating for. What is the mission? What is our goal? And who are we trying to speak for? I end up in my position traveling between the government world, the nonprofit world, trying to figure out how my light stays on. But being able to clearly advocate in this situation, am I trying to advocate for our senior population? Am I trying to advocate for our babies? Am I trying to advocate for our folks who are struggling financially in the community? Or am I trying to advocate for the workforce that work with me to try and be able to create the capacity to provide the services? Or are we working collaboratively with our nonprofits to enhance our community capacity to create that safety net for our citizens? So I think the advocacy is honestly communicating with others on what our mission and our goal is. And that's how we create that influence.
Wonderful. And we have about 5 to 6 minutes left. So I want to use this time as what I will call the brag time. So if you want to each update us on what's going great at your organization and something you want to share with the public. We'll start back with you, Shel. What's going on at social services that you would like to share with us?
The county has given us such great opportunities this year with some of the CARES Act funding to really provide that support for folks who are hitting those crises. Right now, we have a program that we've been able to offer to citizens who are struggling with rent or utilities or mortgage or just facing some significant emergencies, that we can help folks with up to $1,000 using some of those CARES Act funds to help get them through to a more stable period in their life. So we have that, and we're real proud of that. We did a partnership with our economic development and our business communities over the holidays, and provided some restaurant and farm gift cards, and put those gift cards in the hands of our communities. And that was a huge success. It was a great opportunity to see families get a couple $100 of our local restaurants gift cards. And it was a win-win, because the restaurants, like as Charity mentioned, that we're trying to make sure we keep in business and keep those workers in the workforce. It helped them, and it helped families over a little bit of a rough time during the holidays. So I just have an incredible team here who serve till their last breath, I think. And our mission is to really keep folks moving forward in their lives and getting them to a more stable point in their family lives. And I'm real proud to be part of this team. Thank you for having me today.
How about you, Charity?
Oh, well, we've got a lot going on. First quarter is a lot of planning. We want to capitalize on the momentum that we built last year. So we're planning, what does outdoor dining look like this spring and summer? What do some of our events, can we bring them back? Do we adapt them and change them? One of our best things that we have going right now is we've opened the Winter Farmers Market, taking place Saturday mornings at the community center on Shirley Avenue, East Shirley Avenue. So that's fantastic. We have a special surprise this weekend, so make sure you stop by the market and get some fresh items. Although I think Freed's Biscuits has already cut off his pre-orders for his pot pie, so you'll have to come in and get a good biscuit there for the market. But it's really just continuing to build on the momentum. And the momentum is not a word that you hear a lot of small towns talk about after last year. But we did. We had a lot of momentum. We want to build these businesses up and keep them up there and continue that support for shopping small, shopping local, and just working with it. We've got a lot of physical changes that we're looking to make in Old Town, whether it's just a repaving project on Main Street or a First Street plaza. So we've got a lot going on, and we're pretty excited about it.
And Supervisor McDaniel, how about you?
I'll say we just kind of looking back at what the county's been able to accomplish in the last 10 months. As you know, government tends to work very slow, and I've kind of watched them it was very agonizing to go from everything being in person to all of a sudden we're doing everything online and live streaming. And that was a challenge, and they rose to it. Their IT department did a marvelous job. But I think the overall theme during the whole period and even now is, how do we help our constituents get through this? How do we help the businesses? We, with grants, with information, with trying to deploy the CARES Act as best we could, money to have the largest impact on the most number of people, increasing our broadband access, and even as recently as trying to help the Department of Health with the rollout of the vaccine, and offering county personnel and county locations to try to help get the vaccine moving a little bit quicker to the people who need it so desperately. And so I just want to say that I think our team and it's about 750 people at the county government have just done a phenomenal job. With everything with a very challenging period. So I want to thank them for that.
Well, first of all, thank you to Leadership Fauquier for having me. This is, from everything I understand about Leadership Fauquier, it's a great program. So I look forward to being involved in it in the future. We're doing a lot here at the police department. We just rolled out a new program called See It in a Different Light that I'm really excited about. I think I know it's already full, the first class, but it's basically a role reversal program where citizens or residents are put in the police officer's role, and police officers are put in the citizen's role. And again, it goes back to just that overall conversation that we've been having over the last 10 months or so about police reform and how do we kind of bridge those gaps that are there. It's not just good enough anymore to engage the community, right? It's now, we need to now take it to the next level and start involving the community in what we do. So we're doing a lot of that, everything from our community action team, where we meet monthly and they are involved in updating our policies and procedures, and to our Seeing in a Different Light, to our community police academy. So we have a lot going on. We are almost fully staffed. We have one vacancy. So I'm excited because the month of December, we had 110 applicants for that one vacancy, and they're still coming in. So we have no shortage of applicants. We'll see how the process shakes out. So, but we're excited. And again, a lot going on. And I don't think it can be understated the importance of having the right people doing the right jobs. All these programs take people to do, and again, for a small department, for a small government, you got to tap into those resources that the community already provides. And that's volunteers. They're doing a ton of work here. So I couldn't be more proud of the direction that we're going.
Wonderful. And so in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Sandra Roselle, who's going to talk about some opportunities with Leadership Fauquier in the upcoming class. But I would like to give my hearty thanks to Warrenton Police Chief, Michael Kochis, Fauquier Supervisor, Mary Leigh McDaniel, Experience Old Town's Charity Furness, and Social Services, Shel Douglas. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a really wonderful discussion and we've learned so much.
Thank you, Caroline and Sandra, for this opportunity. It's fantastic. And the whole team at Leadership Fauquier. Thank you guys for having us.
Amen. I agree wholeheartedly.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Sandra, you can take it away.
Carolyn, you were great. You really ran a wonderful panel today. 2 words came to mind as I listened to all of you today was compassionate confidence. Compassionate confidence. Chief Kochis saying, know your compass. You all exemplified today the fact that you all do know your compasses and you're very compassionate. And if there's one thing that we can all do as leaders, especially in service, that takes no time at all, is that every time we have a conversation, every time we walk down the street, we are role models. That's how we can be of use and service in this community, is to remember that we are those role models in our community. So that's easy to do every day without taking any extra time. 2 very quick things. As Nathan mentioned, we're going to have our 3rd panel in March 25th, Innovation and Opportunity, the Face of Fauquier Business. And another thing I'm super excited about is that next month we're going to be rolling out a community read, which we're going to be collaborating with the Piedmont Dispute Resolution and the Fauquier County Democratic Party and the Fauquier County Republican Party. So keep your eyes posted for this one. It's going to be a really amazing reading event for our community. Thank you all so much for coming, and I'm just tickled pink over how things went today. Thank you all very much.